If you're someone who has gone to an auto show, chances are you've seen one of the various different concept cars that manufacturers show off. They say, this is the future of our design. It looks so great. And then you kind of get excited. And then after a while, you realize when they finally unveil the real thing years later, it looks like the dollar store made it. And it's always a big disappointment. With the LC500, Lexus decided they were going to try to turn their concept car into reality. Now, this design is not going to be for everyone. I've talked to plenty of people that are just like, hey, it's kind of weird and awkward. You can't tell if it's futuristic or retro. And I talked to my buddy Tom, I've talked to other people, and the best way I can describe it is this looks like a supercar that Toyota wanted to build in the 80s or 90s. It's got this kind of simplistic old school design, namely from the side, with this futuristic edge to it. The side of the LC is where that concept comes to life. It has this long sweeping line from the back to the front. You have the rear fender arches that come out and just slope all the way down to the front, and that front fender design with the crease in it, it is just so liquid looking. This paint is unbelievably good. The clear coat is solid. There's not a lot of orange peel. Yes, this has got a ton of micro scratches and swirl marks on it. It's going to be a difficult paint to take care of, but in the right light, it is unbelievable how good it looks. And I think it brings out the design and the lines of this extremely well. Along the side, there's more to talk about, like the carbon reinforced roof, and that's because this thing's fully optioned out with the performance package. But as you notice, the roof, it goes from chrome to body color to glass to piano gloss black plastic. And at first you're like, this is a really striking look. It gives you that feeling that the roof line's lower, and then it connects all the flowing lines, of course, across the whole car. But you know, the piano gloss black plastic's all scratched up. I wish they would have used glass all the way back, but probably from a production standpoint, it'd be difficult to do a one-piece glass like that. You have air curtains in the back because the air flows along the side of the car to these kind of elongated or wider fenders, so you needed to move air there and around the back wheels, kind of like you do in the front, and it just smooths out airflow in general. Now the front part of the car, this is where the marketing and PR kick in. They talk about the tri-LED projectors and this headlamp enclosure that's one of the smallest on the market. You have air curtains, which most cars have air curtains for aerodynamics as well, that flow from the sides of the bumpers out along the sides of the wheels. There's not too much going on here. There's a lot for airflow. You don't need all the cooling because this isn't a track car. There's not 20 heat exchangers on this thing. But the big question mark has been this grille, and on here it's fully realized. It integrates with the rest of the body structure. It has this flowing design, but to me, just looking at it up close, it's way too busy. From far, it kind of blends in with everything. It just depends on the type of person you are if this is going to be offensive. Now, every car has to have some type of gimmicks. The LC is no different, like these electronically released door handles. When you unlock it or lock it, they go in and out, and there's a little Lexus badge. It's completely unnecessary. It's not totally usable like a regular handle, but it gives it the flair, and it, you know, makes the side of the car look flatter and smoother. The next item that is constantly talked about are these taillights, and they are one of the coolest looking taillights that you will find. They have a mirror in them to give you that infinity looking LED light bar that just keeps going on. And that's great until you get to the top of these headlights and look at this tinfoil-ish, straight up, generic plastic looking top that kind of drags down the whole design, namely when you see it up close. It's like a kid's toy or something. It's weird. Overall, the rear is one of this car's best assets. It's the bumper design. It's the trunk lid. The overall taillight design. It looks like an exotic car to me. But the only thing I would change is these fake exhaust finishers. I think they could figure out a way to do it where you could show off quad tip exhaust while still making everything flow together. The trunk lid has an automatic raising that's an electronically actuated spoiler that comes up and down at speed, and you can manually turn it on inside by hitting a button and lowering it, of course. Now the trunk. Getting away from gimmicks? Well, just look at this. It just pops and releases. It goes up and down through struts, and when you close it, it doesn't automatically close. It doesn't automatically latch itself. The doors don't automatically latch itself. So there's elements here in terms of engineering and design that's more simple. They haven't overcomplicated everything. So a lot of the things that make kind of the mid-level luxury cars good, not overcomplicating it, is here. Now, trunk space, of course, is compromised. You don't have a lot of height. The load floor is higher. The depth, well, the back seats are pretty close, so you don't have a lot of storage space. But the best part is there's a lot of width. I can fit my slider, I can fit my camera bag, and pretty much all my own gear. I think you could probably fit 2 larger carry-on bags, you know, the rolling type, in the back, and some extra stuff for like travel. So it is usable, but you know, it is compromised, of course. That's what this car is about. Getting into the LC500 is something that I'm going to tell you you're probably not going to experience too often. And a lot of it is because the attention to detail in here is unbelievably good for a car in this price range. And it's one of the most spectacular parts about it. Now, yes, this is optional. You have the Alcantara seats. You have some of the more fluffy features like the full Alcantara headliner. But I'm telling you, even though this color is kind of strange, it wouldn't be my first choice. I spent so much time in here marveling at it. And I don't typically do that with cars anymore because, you know, you see one, you see them all. But this is something extremely special. So what do I mean by that? It's the way that the dashboard is leather wrapped. All the edges, the contours, the stitching, the little subtle designs, and the gauge hood in terms of the Alcantara there, the metal trim along the speakers, the grille work, the vent work, the HVAC controls, they all feel like something that is bespoke for this car. And when I say that, people say that a lot, but it is a one-off. This 90% of this is not shared with any other Lexus. There are some carryovers. Somebody asked me in a live stream, well, what's the parts bin items? The turn signal stalks feel, you know, straight up lifted out of a Toyota. Some of the buttons on the steering wheel are a little bit too generic and they stand out a bit too much. The magnesium paddle shifters, although they're the perfect shape, feel good, look good, they still feel like plastic even though they're magnesium. There's little things like that you're going to pick up on, but to complain about it from a craftsmanship perspective is like criminal. I feel bad even nitpicking this car. The detail doesn't end with the dash. It's the door panels. The shell of the door is carbon reinforced plastic. You can see that the way the door design is totally unique. You look at it, you're like, wow, that's different. The door panel has this long sweeping line that curves. It's very fluid, much like the design of the car. And they have this kind of hidden handle into the material. And that's where I say this feels and looks more like an exotic or an ultra expensive car. While it is expensive, it's not bleeding expensive. You know, when you look at a vehicle like the Acuron SX, another kind of expensive Japanese car, that interior is straight up Kmart. It's like something out of a, you know, $30,000 Accord. This feels like legitimately $200,000 in here. Now, of course, there's other aspects to the interior, like nighttime illumination or ambient lighting. It is so simple and elegant looking. They also light up this grid panel in the center stack or center dash area that gives it kind of like that textured look at night. Now, when you close the door, everything surrounds you. It feels like a tailored interior. And that's what I'm talking about. It's one of the intangibles about car design. How does it make you feel? Does it give you an emotional reaction? And this car feels special to me. It has a presence to it on the inside and out. It has a wow factor. And that's something that is really hard to do in modern cars. There's so much I could go on about, from the carpeting design to the quality of all the touch points. It's one of those vehicles you just have to get in to really appreciate. If you can get to a Lexus dealership just to sit in one, even if you can't afford it, I guaranteed you're going to be impressed. But now it's time to talk about the reality of it, the negatives. Let's get into it. The shifter. Lexus made this claim that they were able to free up so much space, reduced complication of having a digi shifter in here. Now, this digi shifter is like what the ZF transmission's been doing, what the American car companies like Chrysler did, and now reverted back to a shifter with detents. This electronic shifter has an ECU just for shifting and an electronic actuator to move the cable to shift it into park and gear and all that. It's needlessly complicated, and what it does is it also is a usability problem. I constantly am putting in neutral in accident. I don't know when I'm going into manual mode because manual mode's straight down, but you have to push it to the left to go into drive. They're trying to address something that was never broken to begin with, all for the sake of saving space. The next problem is kind of usability. There's not a lot of storage space in this car. There's a lot less than you think there would be. The glove box is tiny and it's kind of got an electronic release. It is very fluid. It's very light, well designed, but there's not a lot of space in there. You have a single cup holder here, which, you know, of course, is going to obstruct your HVAC controls. The door pockets are small. It's basically, there's no room for anything but your phone. You can't fit a bottle in there, and there's a side pocket over here for the passenger. So space is extremely limited. They did not think about usability. They thought about more of style and design. And if you're okay with that, you're going to love this. Now, I spent a lot of time digging around in here because it's one of these few vehicles that I truly would consider owning. I'd figure out a way to own this car. It's so good in so many ways, but there are some things that make me question it. It's just little things that are super annoying. Like when I turn off traction and stability control, this gauge cluster, you can't dismiss it. It's constantly alerting you. There's an alert menu that tells you that, and then there's a constant pop-up. You dismiss it, comes back. There's just a little electronic annoyances in here like that you can tell it's some type of legal thing that I understand. You accept it twice, but to keep popping up. The reverse chime, when you're going into reverse, it beeps and beeps. Why does it have to beep to let you know it's in reverse? I can tell you why. It's because you have a digi shifter. You don't know what gear you're in. You have to look, so it's beeping to say that. I mean, there's little things like that that really drag this car down. In terms of seating design, this is always a pro or a con. When you get to these kind of more sporty seats, you're going to hurt those people that are bigger. And if you're a smaller person, like me, I love them. I think they are amazing. There's not a ton of adjustment in the seats, which is fine for me, but it's going to probably tax somebody that just can't get comfortable. There's not a lot of up and down motion. There's not a ton of headroom. It just depends on the body type, and you have to check that out. The next thing to talk about is the gauge cluster, and this is ripped straight out of the F Sport model. So if you get an RC F Sport or a IS F Sport, it's the same electro mechanical gauge cluster. It moves the bezel to the right so you can access additional menus. In this car, I think it's just kind of unnecessary. The menus don't really tell you that much. And just overall, it looks cool, but I don't know. It's up to you. The next thing they do, which is a pro, is they put a bezel around the center display. So it doesn't look like a giant screen. It gives it that three-dimensional value that we're losing with putting screens on everything. It's really nice, and I wish more manufacturers would do that. Last few things to talk about. The back seat. Don't get back there. I wouldn't. It's totally unusable and pointless. The only person you put in the back is somebody you hate. The infotainment. This is the upgraded Lexus infotainment setup, and it's very much like all the other Lexuses with the widescreen layout. It's just a little bit quicker. They made some tweaks to the menu structure. You use the touchpad or mouse pad here to kind of scroll. It's got haptic feedback and pinch to zoom. Now, when you go over the menus, it gives you kind of a sub menu. It shows you when you mouse, kind of highlight over it, it says like under settings, display pops up right above it, so I can go and turn the screen off. There's not like a one-touch screen off. And for the most part, it works better than the other Lexus setups, but it's very cumbersome to get around. Like I'm saying, when I have to go in here to turn the seat heaters on and off, it's just, I don't want to have to deal with it. It's just too clumsy. It's too hard to do on the fly, and it's not intuitive enough for me to really say I could deal with this. It's one of the worst parts about Lexus cars still. Now, the only other thing they have is this analog clock, which looks totally out of place in here. And, for the most part, everything works, but my biggest problem is the tech. And that's it for the interior portion. Let's go into the shop and talk to Turbowski about the underbody of the LC. Scott, this is the LC500. It's fresh off the boats, literally, from Japan. I think I personally have been waiting for this car since they announced it like 25 years ago.
Oh, look at you're all happy about it.
That's true, and that's where I first.
And it still looks like it came right off the auto show where you can't touch it and look inside because it's a fake car, but no, it's the real thing.
Yes, that's true. That's what makes this so compelling. But let's talk about the nuts and bolts, since I rambled on about the exterior for about 10 hours. This is Toyota's new GA-L or GAL architecture.
Well, GAL and the LC, ladies' choice, ladies' car.
Is that what LC stands for?
That's what I think it stands for.
What?
Ladies' choice or ladies' car?
It's not a ladies' car. Well, I guess a lady could own it as well, but this is pretty manly in some ways. All right, the GA-L is Toyota's new global architecture luxury. Now, this is designed to be front engine, rear wheel drive without being a Frankenstein, kind of like the RCF or the RC was a Frankenstein between three cars. So they wanted a dedicated architecture that they can build off for a multitude of different cars. Now with this is the first iteration of it, a first example. And this car was built in the same plant as the LFA. So some of the same people that were working on that car were working on this. It's a very specialized facility, and some of their, well, when they were in Formula One and got dominated, some of that, the carbon fiber works and all that is still in that plant. So this has that attention to detail, and you can tell that it's more specialized. Now, this does borrow the RCF and GSF's engine. It's slightly different, but mostly the same. So the front half of the car looks identical, except you don't have oil coolers and transmission coolers on the LC. So that front is blocked off. The second thing you don't have here, you don't have the brake ducts that run from the front bumper to the sides. There's no.
I'm surprised they didn't do anything.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it needs it, and it's not that type of car. But what it does have is you have forged lower aluminum control arm and forged upper A-arms, which is a split design. And this 2-arm lower design and 2-arm upper design for a multi-link like this, it's designed to improve steering feel. And when you have a single arm on a ball joint up top and you have a single arm at the bottom with just one ball joint, the top ball joint doesn't really necessarily follow the bottom ball joint. So when you have 2 up top, 2 ball joints up top, 2 on the bottom, your top follows the bottom, so you get more direct steering feel, less camber change, less strangeness in suspension angle change in general. And it gives you much more direct, solid feeling up front.
Well, it looks like they took the lower ball joints, that one at least, the lower ball joint out of a freaking F-350 Super Duty or something. My God, that thing's huge.
It is really big. The entire knuckle assembly, which is massive, is all aluminum. Pretty much the entire subframe and lower portion of this car is aluminum. And this is designed, again, for weight savings. You have a 6-piston monoblock caliper, and when I did the driving bit, you're going to see, you look at this, it doesn't have brake ducts, it doesn't look all that fancy, but because of the way the front suspension is set up, the way that they've built the rigidity in, and the way that they've designed the strut towers or shock towers, it gives you this amazing sense of braking capability without having to go off the deep end with a brake setup. They do have 2-piece rotors that I don't believe you can separate. It's a 2-piece design, but you buy them in a single piece from Lexus. And they have directional vanes inside, cooling vanes, but there's no slots. They're not cross-drilled. So, there's that, but it should be cheaper to replace, hopefully. The next part, and probably the last part with the front suspension, is you have variable adjustable dampers by KYB. It's all electronically controlled, and they are completely adaptive. So the car decides, based on your driving or your drive modes, how to change the valving on the fly. And it's multi. It's not like 3 modes.
Well, I thought it was this car. They're like 650-way adjustable or something.
Yeah, and I think the math, when you do the math, they probably took 1, 2, 3, and 4 and made up how many different times. But yeah, it's got a ton of adjustability by not using like a magnetic damper. So I'll talk more about the ride quality when I'm driving this. The last part about the front suspension is they spent, according to Lexus, 6 months engineering those upper A-arms. And the way that they mount to the upper shock tower.
That's pretty interesting.
Is very interesting. And the reason that they mounted it on the sides of the strut tower was they were trying to get the hood line as low as possible. In order to get the hood line lower, they had to drop those upper A-arms. And traditionally, you see upper A-arms mounted kind of the middle upper, and you can see these are really split. So it took a lot of engineering to kind of get that down.
I like the little brackets where it attaches to, because usually you have to drop the strut out, and then when it comes time, those bolts don't come apart, and it becomes a freaking disaster. So at least this one, 3 bolts, you're done.
Yeah.
Well, 4 really, but
4. Next is the new 10-speed automatic, Scott. And the 10-speed automatic is smaller and lighter than the 8-speed in the RCF and GSF. Now the behavior of this, the way that they've designed it is it's got 4 planetary gear sets. They've beefed up the torque converter so it can go in lock mode much more aggressively in gears 1 through 4. And this is furthering the 8-speed to the 10-speed, and the gears are closer together all the way. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, they're smushed together. So the point is to give you more of an exhilarating feel of switching gear square. It's like bam, 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 bam. The longest gear is the first gear. It stretches out the longest, but from second, third, fourth, you're like, holy crap, this is like just instantaneous.
An amusement ride.
Yeah, it is. And that's exactly what they were trying to do here. The only part of it is you start to get in these upper gears, and I think you said it. It's like you're already at 100 miles an hour in 4th gear. Like, you still have 6 more gears.
Why even bother?
Yeah, it's like a bicycle, 10-speed bikes. I don't know what those last gears are for other than fuel economy. And I guess technically at any given speed, it can be in the lowest possible or the highest possible gear for fuel efficiency. So there's that. The transmission does change operation mode based on your drive modes. In the rear, in the rump, what do you think?
It's pretty tough.
Yeah, it is tough. And it's tough because what do we got here?
Blow molded arrows things.
Yeah, that's exactly
That's what I'm more intrigued about.
The blow molded arrow things. Yeah, these are not just a piece of plastic. It's like hollow inside, and it follows the asphalt arrow panels to continue the airflow. But Lexus is doing weird stuff here to try to reduce road noise and vibration from the tires and wheels into the body of the car. So this is likely one of those things that they're doing. If you get the 20-inch wheel option on this car, which this doesn't have, it has 21-inch forged wheels with run flats, which kind of negate all the things they're working on. If you get the 20-inch wheels, the outer rim is hollow. And it's hollow to help reduce and it stops the transmission of a lot of tire
absorbs
It absorbs it. Now you have your lower and upper control arms are all aluminum. Your knuckles aluminum. There's attempts at weight savings here. And what do we have here, Scott?
Torsion limited slip.
Yep. What's the gear ratio?
2.94.
Oh my God. Why?
That's tall. We got 10 speeds. You got to be able to use it.
Yeah, true.
Or they want to be able to use the 10 speed, I guess you should say.
Yeah. The next thing we're going to notice is it has an ASIN rear wheel steering module. And combined with the Torsen, this is supposed to give you an extremely controlled ride and just handling overall. And I talked about this with Lexus. The RCF uses a torque vectoring differential and no rear wheel steering, but the RCF Sport uses rear wheel steering and no TVD. There's this weird lack of consistency in what Toyota's doing here, but it's based on engineering decision. What does the car need? And this doesn't need a TVD based on my experience.
Well, the LCF will have it.
Yes.
Well, they probably, this is my opinion, they probably put the rear wheel steering to give you a false sense of the handling.
True.
While what the hell is it? The RCF, you're going to drive, they assume you're going to drive it harder, and they don't need to give you that false sense of.
Yeah, the grip, because it's always transferring the power to the right wheel. And it's probably a way to keep the cost down. Not to say that they built this to a price point, but that's going to add more cost to it. And I like the mechanical. I like when things are more simple. So having a regular Torsen that's not electronically controlled, it's something that you can buy this long term and not have to worry about something like this to replace it. Now, before we look under the hood, it's time to talk about weight reduction and structural rigidity, because that was a huge focus of building this architecture. Now, Lexus has done a lot, but first off, let's get it on the wheel scales and take a look at what the true weight and corner balance is. All right. It's been weighed 4,410 pounds. That's, to put that in perspective, it's over 300 pounds heavier than the RCF.
Which isn't much. This car looks a lot bigger.
It does look a lot bigger, even though the interior dimensions don't reflect that, but exterior-wise, yes. Now, here's what they've done. There's about 3 times the amount of structural adhesives used in this entire body structure than there is on the IS car.
I thought I heard it's the most structurally sound car they've ever made.
Yeah,
stronger than the LFA.
Stronger than the LFA?
That's what I thought I read somewhere.
Okay, I think you're right, and that's because they're starting to master the use of laser screw welding, a different type of technique to bond steel to aluminum. There's a whole bunch of different things that they're doing to reduce or increase the rigidity of this car, reduce vibration. But the other thing they're doing is using more composite materials, like the trunk lid being carbon reinforced plastic. The door panels are carbon reinforced plastic. The roof, which is optional, is carbon fiber. So you have those elements along with the use of aluminum hood, aluminum door skins. I mean, they've really tried to kind of use as much, alloy and composites as possible for this car. But that's enough of that. Let's take a look under the hood. Scott, you are looking at the 2UR GSC 5-liter V8 with direct and port injection. This makes somewhere around 471 horsepower and 390 something pounds of torque. And somebody's going to ask, is it fast? I've already had people ask me, is it fast? And my straight answer is no, it's not fast. It's not fast like you would expect the Durango SRT you just got out of, the ZL1 Camaro. Those cars felt fast because they have this immense amount of torque that throws you back in your seat. This doesn't give you the same impression, but on paper, it's pretty fast at around 4.5 seconds to 0 to 60. And for street driving, I would take this, and I'm just going to say it, I would take this over some high torque, high horsepower motor that's totally unusable for street driving. This sounds amazing, it feels amazing, and it revs out so smooth. It has this beautiful, mechanical sound to it. And a lot of that is engine tuning, exhaust tuning, and now you have a dual intake system with 2 air boxes, 2 air filters.
Checking that out, it looks tough.
It is tough. And the GT86 and BRZ owners are going to be slathering their underwear with stool when they find out that this has a sound tube or a sound generator. It is a mechanical pipe that runs from the intake to the interior of the car to generate different frequencies at different engine RPM. So Lexus finally decided to do away with the active sound design or the fake engine noise through the speakers and make it a mechanical induction tone. And the amount of work that they did to tune the resonator and these pipes.
They have Yamaha do it?
No, they didn't have Yamaha do it, but they learned from, it's very similar to the LFA. So this pipe runs all the way down through the center part here into the firewall, and they're trying to create like a stereo soundtrack with just air and resonance. And these are all tuned tubes. Like they said, it's like an instrument set down to the millimeter.
That's crazy.
I know, it's crazy, but it sounds great. It literally does. And you're going to hear a lot of that when we're doing some driving stuff. Now, the second thing to talk about under the hood, these alloy shock towers. They are an aluminum piece. They're incredibly rigid, and it connects, I think, about 5 different connecting braces from here to the back to the firewall on both sides to kind of tie it all together. So again, this is part of the rigidity, and this is unique to this car. You don't see it on any other Lexus products, and it is massive. But part of this rigidity in these towers is to lower the hood line, and that's why the upper A-arms are lower down, and that's part of all this, is to design it so the suspension works properly. But the last thing that it has, you know what these are?
I have no idea.
It's also
I know, I was going to ask you what the hell that is.
Pedestrian crash impact
Oh my God.
mitigation.
No, so this car, throw it in the garbage already just for that.
They had to do it because the hood was so low. That was the only way they could get the hood line low enough to pass regulations. So these modules will, once there's an impact, it can sense a pedestrian impact, it will literally pop the hood up to prevent the pedestrian.
Well, right, it has to have so much clearance between the engine, and so it's a cushion.
Yeah, so it basically decouples the hood and pops it up. So that is also tied into airbag sensor, so it knows, hey, if there's a pedestrian impact, it's not going to trigger the airbags when it pops the hood.
This car just lost all credit for that.
Well,
it's sad that they have to worry about pedestrian safety.
I agree. Everything is compromised now in modern cars. As much as they've tried to.
I learned at 2 years old, look both ways before you cross the road, and if you're in the street, there's a high possibility there might be a car coming.
Why would somebody teach you that? You should just get a computer to do all that stuff for you.
You just get hit and then realize, oh shit, I shouldn't have done that.
Right. No, we got to build everything. We got to build technology to avoid human stupidity, Scott. You can't be responsible. Setting off in the magnificent LC500. Now, we can talk all day about the specs, about the looks, and a lot of the times, none of that matters. This is what matters, what it's like to drive the car, unless you're a hard parker, of course. Now, there are high levels of expectations about what this car drives like. Let's get to the most fundamental thing first. Fuel economy, and I know most people aren't going to care about this, but this vehicle has a split personality. And when you're driving in eco mode and you leave it in automatic, I had a 100-mile round trip highway driving of over 30 miles to the gallon. It's really effective, and that's because this vehicle can do advanced valve overlap, cam phasing, it has direct and port injection, and then the 10-speed automatic. It just allows it all the mechanical attributes to get that type of fuel economy. But here's the thing, when I'm in manual mode and I'm in Sport Plus and you start to put the pedal to the metal, you're looking at 13 to 14 miles to the gallon at best. The next thing is ride control. You look at this is like that luxury touring car. It had better ride well. And when you get it over broken and choppy pavement, I gotta tell you, this is where this vehicle's let me down. Namely, when you hear how much time they spent developing the chassis, all the time they spent on the suspension design, the dual ball joint setup in the upper A-arm, the lower hub or the lower knuckle. It's a choppy ride over broken pavement. And I think 90% of that is because they have 21-inch wheels on this thing. And when you have 21-inch wheels, when you get to these bigger wheel tire combos, you have no sidewall, so there's not a lot of give to it. And I think instead of softening up the suspension, they've just chose to leave it as is, and then you use this as an option. I would definitely not get these wheels and tires for this car because of it. Now, the dampers are variable. They can constantly adjust the valving based on your drive modes, how you're driving it. The ECU is constantly looking at yaw rates, G-force, all the driver inputs to kind of set the car up where it needs to be to kind of dampen the car appropriately. And as much as this is trying to be that grand tourer, it's more of a sports car grand tourer. And I say that because the engine and transmission performance when you're in Sport Plus, manual mode, traction stability control off is absolutely amazing. And the steering input, despite it having a variable gear ratio, it's constantly adjusting itself. This is more trying to feel connected to the driver, and that's one of the things I really like about the overall driving experience. Now, I don't think it's to the level of a sports car, but they're not trying to do that here. They're trying to give you the luxury, the feeling that it is something very unique while allowing you to have a little bit of fun. And that's what we're going to talk about now, is the performance. So here's the thing. People are going to talk about this being kind of like, well, why not just get a GSF or an RCF? Okay, there's a couple reasons why this is totally different. The first thing is the immediacy and the response of the chassis. When you hit the brakes, there's no roll, there's no transition, it just stops. There's this sense of rigidity in the car that you always feel, that you feel like it's always going to respond to what you're doing. And I think that's one of the best parts about this car, is it's responsive to all your inputs. Throttle response is razor sharp. There's no delay, there's no lag. Steering feels like it's always on tap. The brakes, as soon as you get into them, the car responds and stops. And this is in a grand touring machine. Of course, now we're talking about street driving, right? This isn't, designed to be a track car, and you could take it there, but I don't think it'd be a lot of fun. But this is far superior dynamically than the GSF and the RCF in every single way. The other thing to talk about is the stability control system. Like on most Lexuses, it's not fully defeatable. There's just this element where it comes back on at certain times, and it's usually lateral G-force. If you get the car too sideways, it kicks back in. If you are in first gear in manual mode, it will auto upshift. So I'm kind of on this turn and I'm gonna peg it. You can see that it auto upshifted for me into second gear to avoid the car from totally getting out of sorts. And I think my point with this is, yes, it kind of dumbs down the experience. You can't fully get this car sideways. It always keeps the leash on you a little bit. But the thing is, for most street driving, you can get it just enough sideways to put a smile on your face, and it really is totally controllable. And I think they've designed this for somebody that knows, hey, they're not gonna drive like a total idiot all the time, and they want that safety net. This is still an extremely confidence-inspiring car for somebody that doesn't have a lot of seat time, that's not really that, great at driving a rear-wheel drive car. You just don't get the sense that it's out of control. Some of that is because of the rear-wheel steering. That rear-wheel steering module definitely helps to get the car to turn. And the other part is the torsion limited slip. It's not totally out of control. I don't think this car needs a torque vectoring differential. I don't think it's necessary at all until they maybe make like an F version of this car, some hardcore track version of it. But as it stands, it's extremely controllable and fun to operate. Now, the biggest difference and the biggest pro of the LC500 is this 10-speed automatic. And we talk about this a lot with the RCF and the GSF. They have this 8-speed. And people complain, well, it's not responsive enough. It doesn't downshift like a dual clutch. The thing is, they've programmed it to be kind of this dual purpose transmission. Smooth when you're just cruising around, and then when you're driving flat out, this transmission is at its best when you have traction stability control off and you're in full manual mode. The transmission response is so good, you can see why so many companies are starting to ditch dual clutches. My favorite thing is the sound. This is what sells me on the car. Now, you might be wondering, there's got to be some type of negatives with it. I think some people are not going to be that impressed with the ride quality. If you're looking for a pure luxury car, a pure cruiser that is soft on every surface, I don't think that you're going to like this car, especially with the 21-inch wheels. Steering is a contention of argument on every modern car. I think it's super direct without being totally synthetic, but there's not a lot of feel to it. It's a little bit too isolated. And again, this car is not about performance. It's about giving you the feeling that it's a sports car while still being a luxury car, which is, nice. That's what most people want anyway. Let's take a look at the final thoughts, and I'll give you the rundown of everything. final thoughts on the Lexus LC500. Now, it's been about 2 weeks since I drove this last. I just finished the edit. My goal was to stay neutral, objective, and non-emotional throughout it. So here it goes. This is one of the best modern cars I've ever driven. And the primary reason is simple. When you get inside and out of so many new cars, what you start to see is copycatting. The designers, the product planners are stealing from this guy, copying that, hopefully to sell as many cars as possible. That's not what the LC500 is about. You can tell they just wanted to build a car that they wanted to build. It wasn't trying to be an Audi, a Mercedes, a BMW, or anybody else. And that is why it feels special to drive and to be inside and to look at. Now, it may not be for everybody. At $100,000, this becomes kind of an aspirational vehicle. It's not totally outside the realm of possibility, but it's just getting there. On the used market, people are going to be clamoring for this car, and I think it's going to be totally reliable. The next thing that Lexus did was they tried to focus on mechanical simplicity. They didn't overcomplicate the car. They wanted to focus on driving dynamics. So this architecture, if there's any sign that they're going to reutilize this platform on future sports cars like the Supra, people are going to be really happy with this. Steering, engine performance, transmission performance are all at a high level. And speaking of the engine, that's one of the best parts. This naturally aspirated 5-liter is amazing in this car, partly because of the induction tone, no fake engine noise. You finally have a real exhaust on a Lexus. It's that 360 experience you get driving this thing. And we all know it's going away for turbocharged V8s or V6s, inline 4s. That's what everybody's doing. So this is so refreshing to drive this. Now, the negatives are still negative. The tech that's there, the infotainment is still just, I hate it. The digi stick for the shifter, the constant alerts in the dash, the beeping, all the way that you have to menu jump in the dash. I don't know. I feel like they could even further simplify this in a car like that. But that aside, I mean, you can live with the little things like that because it is so fun and so nice to pilot. Lastly, you don't have to be a professional race car to drive this. The amount of horsepower and torque that this car has is still usable for the street. Yes, it's pushing 500 horsepower, but the way that it delivers power is not totally wasted. I was on summer tires in freezing temperature and I could still drive this car really hard, as you saw in the video. I think so many people are going to appreciate that element of the LC500. So I hope you appreciated that video. Thanks for all your time, and I look forward to bringing you more in-depth coverage on different cars and products throughout the world.